Australians love debt. Well, I don't know if we love it, but we certainly have a lot of it. According to the International Monetary Fund, Australia has one of the highest levels of household debt in the world. The following chart shows us the levels of household debt for selected countries as a percentage of GDP. Since 2008, households in the United States, shown in orange, have steadily been lowering their debts. They're currently sitting at 77.66%. China, at the bottom of the chart, despite all the news about its massive debt, are only sitting at 49.22%, although this is rapidly rising. This figure is probably quite low due to the large rural population in China. It would be interesting to see the debt levels of urban Chinese. I suspect they would be much higher. Japan's household debt levels, shown in red, have been steadily going down over the last 20 years or so. The UK debt levels, in blue, have been going down since the global financial crisis in 2008, but have since flatlined at 86.35% of GDP. However, Australia and Canada, shown at the top of the chart, are the focus of this video. They seem to be following a similar pattern. Although there was a small dip in 2008, both countries have been increasing their household debt at an alarming rate. Australia, in green, is at a whopping 121.71% of GDP, one of the worst debt levels in the world. Before we go any further, let's first define household debt. Household debt typically includes mortgages, car loans, student loans, and credit card debt. Here's a chart from the US, but it is fairly representative of other OECD countries' household debt levels. The home mortgage is by far the biggest contributor to household debt. This is followed by student debt, motor vehicle loans, and then finally consumer loans, credit cards and the like. Now let's take a look at household debt as a percentage of net disposable income. This chart shows a list of G20 countries in the OECD and their household debt levels. Again, Australia is leading the pack, with Canada not too far behind. Surprisingly, Koreans are in a lot of debt as well. I've never lived in Korea, so perhaps it's not so surprising. Australians have an average household debt level of 211% of disposable income. What does that exactly mean? It means that a household with a disposable income, i.e. after paying tax, of say $100,000, has a household debt of $211,000. On the face of it, this doesn't sound particularly bad, right? But we have to remember that these statistics are the average across all Australian households. Not every household has a mortgage. Actually, only about 1/3 do. The other 2/3 have either paid off their mortgage, for example older people, or they rent. This indicates that the average person servicing a mortgage in Australia has a much higher household debt as a percentage of their disposable income than this data suggests. Furthermore, people who recently bought into this overinflated housing market would be at even greater levels of debt. We should also remember that with debt comes interest. These interest repayments eat significantly into people's disposable income. The typical home loan requires the borrower to pay back both interest and principal, slowly chipping away at the loan. But some people choose to reduce their monthly repayments in the short term by only paying back the interest, the so-called interest-only mortgage. But interest-only loans come at a price. If you spend 5 years paying back the interest only, you'll still owe the same amount of money 5 years later. You're making no headway on your overall mortgage. Some people, especially investors, do this hoping the value of their property will increase. They can then sell their house and make a tidy profit, but this certainly is a gamble in today's wobbly market. If the Australian housing bubble bursts, the value of our housing assets will fall precipitously, but the size of our debt will not. One side is fixed and the other moves around. So Australians are swimming in debt, but will this actually hurt us? A ministerial brief prepared for Treasurer Josh Frydenberg was released on November 5, 2018, under Freedom of Information provisions, and states, "A large increase in unemployment would quickly see an increase in loan defaults, which leads banks to slow the flow of credit to the economy. The situation would likely be compounded by weaker consumption as other households make efforts to repair their balance sheets. Moreover, given residential mortgages comprise about 80% of Australian household debt and around 60% of bank assets, falling house prices increase this vulnerability as they erode borrower equity and potentially expose financial institutions to losses in instances of default. The bottom line is that households will likely continue to service debt unless unemployment prevents them from doing so. Other reports have shown that up to 1 million households are on the edge of mortgage default. Their debt levels are too high and they're running out of ability to service them. If the Reserve Bank of Australia lifts interest rates, as they certainly will do eventually, many Australians will be, as we say in Australia, stuffed. They simply won't be able to pay back their massive debt. The RBA has also been concerned about the impact of high household debt on consumption, because consumption is a key economic driver. In a recent monetary policy statement, they wrote, "A highly indebted household facing weaker than expected growth in income or wealth is more likely to respond by lowering consumption. Consumption growth may also be weaker for a time if households become concerned about their debt levels and choose to pay down debt more quickly." So with increasingly high household debt comes an increasing chance of economic downturn. What have we got ourselves into? But the question that I'd like to ask and attempt to answer in this video is why? Why have Australians and Canadians and Koreans got themselves into so much debt? What is it about debt that we can't get enough of? Well, sometimes it's out of our control. For example, you lose your job and have a big electricity bill to pay. Naturally, some of us will reach for the credit card in this situation to keep our power switched on. Of course, there are other emergencies that arise that need some quick cash, like an unexpected dental bill or a car repair. But many of these unexpected bills could be averted by simply having some savings on hand, the so-called rainy day fund. Clearly, many people don't have one and are living paycheck to paycheck. Lots of people are simply not saving any money, and by getting more and more into debt, their monthly repayments keep increasing, making it even harder to save in the future. Debt often brings about more debt. But the biggest reason why people get into debt, in my estimation, is because of a particular family that live nearby, a family with the life and the stuff that we want. Of course, I'm talking about the Joneses. For over 100 years, we've been trying to keep up with the Joneses, but apparently we still can't keep up with them. You see, when money becomes cheap and readily available, everyone has access to it, even the Joneses. If everyone has access to cheap credit, then naturally lots of people will buy that new shiny car or that glamorous house. In turn, their neighbours will see the new car and want one for themselves. They head out and get a car loan to buy the newer model. The neighbours then become increasingly unsatisfied with their perfectly drivable, but yet out-of-date, car. More debt ensues and the cycle repeats itself. People want more and more stuff and they want it now. Waiting for something seems like a thing of the past. When I was a kid, I was always taught to save up my money to buy the things that I liked. It took me about 3 months to buy that remote control car that I wanted. Now with the power of finance, people can literally walk into a car dealership with no money and come out driving a car. It's bordering on ridiculous. It's become far too easy to get into debt. It used to be that you had to go to the local loan shark or underworld figure to get some fast cash, but nowadays you can literally go anywhere. With services like Afterpay and ZipPay, you can just walk into Target with no money and buy anything you like without them even checking your credit history. You could be up to your eyeballs in debt, have no savings and no ability to repay the debt, and still can get into more debt. What have we created? Some kind of money-gobbling monster. Since 2015, Australians have been spending more than they have been earning. Sounds ridiculous, right? But it's true. It means on average, we just keep using up any savings that we had left and getting further and further into debt. And why do we do it? Because we want more stuff. We want stuff that we don't even need. We want new cars, new TVs, new sofas, and new smartphones. We don't want to keep our old phone. We don't want to keep our 60-inch TV because now there's a 65-inch. We don't want to save up for anything. We just want all of this useless stuff and we want it right now. What effect does all this extra debt have on our lives? I have one word to describe it: slavery. A voluntary form of debt slavery. Some people will argue that it is not really slavery in the true sense of the word, and I agree, but at the very least, you're giving up some of your future life in order to pay back the bank. If you have a 30-year mortgage, plus a couple of car loans and a few maxed out credit cards, you will have to work the next 40 years of your life to pay it all off. Sure, you could choose not to pay back the bank, but we all rationally know the result. Bye-bye house, bye-bye car, bye-bye 65-inch TV set. By getting into massive debt, you are beholden to the banks. They can control your life. To me, that's slavery. When will all this stop? When will we stop getting further and further into debt? I think the only way to stop this madness is for some sort of massive financial crisis to take place where everyone loses everything. Only then will people understand the true value of the things that they took for granted. As Tyler Durden said in Fight Club, it's only after we've lost everything that we're free to do anything. You can choose to go out and buy that new car. You can choose to go out and buy that massive house. But if the result is 30 or 40 years of debt slavery, I say, no, thank you. I don't want the banks running my life. I don't want to have to work some crappy job for the rest of my miserable existence just so I can keep all my nice stuff. The reality is, when you get into debt, you simply end up owing more and owning less. It's costing you money to spend money. Creditors have no interest in helping borrowers stay out of debt. They are, after all, for-profit businesses. They earn money from your enslavement. You don't want to be a slave, do you? I say, screw the banks. Screw the payday lenders. Screw the buy now, pay later providers. They all just want one thing, your future earnings. And by giving it to them, you're setting yourself up for a life of drudgery.